This is how wars begin. Trump is not projecting strength tonight. He is projecting instability, and the Middle East is absorbing the shockwave. What we are watching right now is a disastrous chain reaction triggered by reckless escalation. Iran is unleashing coordinated waves of missiles and drones across the Gulf. Explosions are tearing across the skies over Doha. Smoke is rising near the Al Safra base in Abu Dhabi. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet Service Center in Bahrain has been targeted. Airspace is shutting down. American embassies are ordering citizens to shelter in place. The State Department is urging Americans in Lebanon to get out while they still can. That is not control. That is blowback spiraling outward. Here is the grotesque reality. This retaliation was not improvised. It was prepared, immediate, structured, which means someone in Washington either catastrophically misread the consequences or believed in magical thinking that Iran would simply absorb the strikes and fold. Instead, we are staring at mass drone deployments moving toward Israel, missile salvos designed to overwhelm layered air defenses, and Gulf nations furious that they are now collateral damage in a widening conflict. This is not strategy. This is a strategic humiliation unfolding in real time. And I'm about to show you exactly how this reckless gamble detonated, and why the fallout may only be accelerating from here. Now let's talk about the lie. Because just days ago, we were being told this escalation would be limited, controlled, strategic. We were told the strikes on Iranian targets were precise actions designed to restore deterrence without triggering regional war. That was the narrative. Calm, calculated, contained. Let's look at what actually happened. Within hours of the US and Israeli military campaign expanding across Iran, the retaliation began. Not symbolic, not restrained. Coordinated missile and drone strikes targeting US military installations across the Gulf, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE. These are not random locations. These are strategic American assets. Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, home to forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command, Al Dhafra near Abu Dhabi. Let me repeat that. Forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. And we're supposed to believe this was not going to escalate? Because here's what makes this even more damning. Reports indicate the Iranian response was immediate and pre-planned. Analysts are already pointing out that in past incidents, after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani during previous flare-ups, Iran took days to respond. This time, hours. That suggests preparation, contingency planning, assets positioned in advance. You cannot claim surprise when the retaliation looks organized. And while officials are now scrambling to assess whether CENTCOM anticipated this magnitude of response, embassies are telling Americans to shelter in place. Airspace is being closed across multiple Gulf states. Regional governments are expressing anger that they are being dragged into direct confrontation, despite previously signaling they did not want their territory used as launch pads. That contradiction matters, because if you were confident this would remain contained, you do not evacuate personnel. You do not brace for swarms of drones, potentially hundreds, even thousands, aimed at Israel and beyond. You do not suddenly warn civilians to flee neighboring countries. The public messaging said deterrence. The operational reality says escalation. And as we're going to see when we dig into the military assessments and what officials are admitting on the record, this is not a small flare-up. This is the architecture of a broader conflict taking shape in real time. Now let's dig into what is actually being said on the record, because the details here are staggering. I want you to picture this in real time. CNN correspondents reporting repeated explosions over Abu Dhabi. The Ministry of Defense in the UAE confirming missile interceptions. One person reportedly killed by falling debris after an interception attempt. Smoke seen near the Al Safra base. That is not hypothetical escalation. That is kinetic reality. And it doesn't stop there. Let's look at Doha. Another wave of incoming missiles. Qatari officials confirming interceptions. Shelter-in-place orders across multiple Gulf states. Airspace closures. This is coordinated retaliation across sovereign territory that did not want to be dragged into this fight in the first place. Now here's where it becomes strategically alarming. I'm going to walk you through the military geography because it matters. In Kuwait, Ali Al Salem Air Base, a critical U.S. Air Force installation. In the UAE, Al Dhafra Air Base, roughly 20 miles south of Abu Dhabi. In Bahrain, the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. In Qatar, Al Udeid Air Base, not just an airstrip, but the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. That's not random targeting. That's structured signaling. And analysts are already pointing out something deeply significant: the speed of this retaliation. In previous confrontations, after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, for example, Iran took days to respond, 5 days in one instance. That delay reflected disrupted command and control. This time, the counterstrikes began within hours. Hours. That implies prepositioned assets, pre-approved strike packages, contingency planning anticipating exactly this scenario. You do not mobilize coordinated drone and missile waves across multiple countries overnight without preparation. You cannot make this up. Now let's talk about scale. Military analysts are describing potentially several hundred, even 1,000 drones moving toward Israeli and possibly other regional targets. Combine that with ballistic missile inventories that Iran still possesses, and you're looking at layered offensive saturation. And here is where it gets technically dangerous. Israel's Iron Dome system was designed primarily for short-range rockets, not mass drone swarms. Yes, modifications have been made. Yes, Israel also deploys David Sling and the Arrow systems for longer-range threats. Yes, the U.S. Navy has Aegis-equipped ships positioned off the Israeli coast to assist with missile defense, but saturation changes the equation. A swarm of drones can overwhelm radar tracking capacity. Even advanced integrated air defense systems have thresholds. The strategy here appears to be quantity over precision, forcing defensive systems to expend interceptors, creating openings, testing limits. This is escalation math. And while this is unfolding, regional governments are condemning the strikes. Saudi Arabia calling the attacks blatant and cowardly. Qatar labeling them a violation of national sovereignty. The UAE condemning them in the strongest terms. There is anger, not just fear, that they have become active battlefields. That diplomatic friction matters because it fractures coalition stability. Now let's address the regime change rhetoric that is surfacing. Officials are floating the idea that sustained pressure could weaken the Iranian regime. But listen to what experienced analysts are warning. Regime change is not achieved through airstrikes alone. If the current government collapses, intelligence experts suggest the most likely immediate successor is not a liberal democracy. It is a military dictatorship under the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Think about that. You destabilize a regime, and you may end up empowering the most hardline faction inside it. Beyond that lies fragmentation risk. Ethnic splinter groups, regional breakaways, chaotic power vacuums. So when people talk casually about regime change, they are engaging in dangerous oversimplification. What we are watching is not a clean strategic play. It is a complex, combustible escalation with military, diplomatic, and political consequences rippling simultaneously. And the deeper we go into the details, the clearer it becomes. This was not a symbolic exchange. This was a structured, pre-planned counteroffensive designed to send a message and test the limits of U.S. and Israeli defense architecture. Gross miscalculation meets real-world consequences. And this is still unfolding. Now step back for a moment, because this is not happening in isolation. This is not a one-off exchange. This is part of a pattern. And the pattern is instability following impulsive escalation. We are watching leadership that is reacting, not anticipating. And that distinction is everything. When you see embassies telling Americans to shelter in place across the Gulf, when you see urgent advisories telling U.S. citizens in Lebanon to get out while commercial options still exist, when you see airspace shutting down from Bahrain to Qatar to the UAE, that is not the behavior of a contained operation. That is crisis posture. And it fits a broader theme we've seen before: reckless decision-making followed by frantic damage control. Think about the rhetoric. For years, we've heard bombastic declarations about strength, about crushing adversaries, about overwhelming force. But strength is not measured by how loudly you talk. It is measured by what happens after you act. And what is happening right now? Drone swarms, missile salvos, regional governments furious that their sovereignty is being tested. Military analysts openly questioning whether the magnitude of retaliation was properly anticipated. That is not dominance. That is strategic volatility. And let's talk about the political psychology here. Because when escalation is framed as bold leadership, and then the blowback arrives immediately, immediate, coordinated, multi-country, the narrative starts to crack. You cannot project control while embassies are issuing emergency guidance. You cannot claim deterrence while hundreds of drones are testing layered missile defense systems. You cannot talk about regime change as if it's a clean chess move when intelligence experts are warning that the likely successor could be an even more hardline military dictatorship. That is magical thinking colliding with geopolitical reality. We've seen this pattern before in different forms. Dramatic gestures without fully internalizing second-order consequences. Business ventures that collapsed because projections were inflated. Political gambles that backfired because opponents did not respond the way they were expected to. Overconfidence leading to cascading complications. Now translate that mindset onto a regional military confrontation. This is not a branding exercise. This is not a failed casino or a shuttered product line. This is missile defense thresholds. This is naval fleet positioning. This is sovereign airspace being violated. The stakes are exponentially higher. And while analysts are carefully parsing interception rates and drone swarm capacities, the bigger picture is coming into focus. This is escalation momentum. Each response invites another response. Each salvo invites countermeasures. Each strike tightens alliance pressures and regional anxieties. That is how conflicts widen. It doesn't happen in one dramatic announcement. It happens in layers. First airstrikes, then retaliation, then expanded targeting, then diplomatic strain, then miscalculation. This is not an isolated flare-up. It is a stress test of deterrence architecture, alliance cohesion, and executive decision-making all at once. And when you combine rapid retaliation, pre-planned strike capacity, saturated air defenses, and loose talk of regime change, you are not looking at a stable plateau. You are looking at a system under strain. And systems under strain either stabilize quickly or they fracture. This is the difference between bravado and reality. What we are witnessing is not a clean show of force. It is the dangerous space where rhetoric meets consequences. When missiles are flying over Doha, when drone swarms are testing Israeli air defenses, when U.S. bases across the Gulf are on alert, this stops being political theater. This becomes accountability. Because leadership is not about dramatic announcements. It is about understanding the second, third, and fourth order effects of your decisions. And when escalation unfolds within hours, coordinated, prepared, widespread, that raises serious questions about judgment. We cannot afford magical thinking in moments like this. We cannot afford reckless gambles that gamble with regional stability. Democracy demands transparency, clarity, and responsibility, especially when military force is involved. If you believe in independent analysis that cuts through spin and tells you what is actually happening, support this channel. Hit subscribe. Help us grow this community so more people understand the stakes in real time. Because informed citizens are harder to mislead. And moments like this demand clarity, not chaos.